So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining in for another Serving Up Summer cooking demonstration. My name is Emily, and I am one of your Stop and Shop Nutrition Partners registered dietitians. And today's theme for Serving Up Summer is Summer Switch Up. Because I figured at this point in the summer, we've hit a lot of those big grilling holidays. So we had Memorial Day, we had the 4th of July, and you probably had various barbecues in between, right? And so thinking about the rest of the barbecues and outdoor grilling events we have to enjoy in the summer, I figured a lot of people are looking for ways to switch things up, right? Maybe we're getting sick of hamburgers or hot dogs and we want something different, maybe some lighter options, maybe mix in some nutritious options, and overall just have some different things to grill. So today I'll be highlighting a seafood recipe and a fully plant-based recipe that could be incorporated into your upcoming barbecues. So before I dive into the recipes for today, I'll just start off with our few brief housekeeping notes. So today's workshop is intended just to be a cooking demonstration. So just for time purposes, I won't be walking you all through the full steps for each recipe. But with that being said, if you are curious to make either of these recipes following the class, I will be sending out a recap email at some point following the class, where I will include the full recipes or the link so you can access the full recipes. So all of the ingredients, all of the instructions will be listed there for you. So definitely check that out if you want to get the full scoop on the recipes. Today's cooking demonstration will be about 15 minutes long. I'll walk you all through our two recipes here, and then I am happy to end the demonstration with Q&A. So please feel free to drop any of your questions into the chat box. And I think that gets all our housekeeping notes out of the way. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the two recipes that I have for you all today. So we are first going to start off with our seafood recipe. And the recipe that I have to share with you all today is a grilled shrimp over tomatoes with a homemade pesto sauce. So just to kind of chat through some of the ingredients that I have for this recipe, let's start with shrimp. I think it is never a bad idea to have a bag of frozen shrimp stuffed somewhere in the back of your freezer, because frozen shrimp, one, is a really great, versatile, quick cooking protein option, right? Shrimp is pretty quick to cook. You could use it in a variety of different recipes. So of course, I'm going to be showcasing a specific recipe today, but you could also use shrimp in tacos. You can make some shrimp tacos. You could also throw it into a pasta dish as an easy protein option. So all around, it is pretty versatile. Like I said, pretty easy to prepare. And it also is a nutritious protein option. So shrimp does tend to be a leaner protein, meaning it's going to be low in saturated fat, which is something we want to try and limit in our diets for heart health. So shrimp could be sort of a nice lean protein to help mix up what you're enjoying throughout the week. So I am using some frozen shrimp for this recipe. And I would say the next star of our show here are tomatoes. So I have some beautiful, big, juicy, flavorful tomatoes. Tomatoes are in season now during the summer months, so they really are the perfect time to enjoy them. I just am using some red tomatoes today, but if your local store has heirloom varieties, so those would be tomatoes that really have those bright and vibrant greens and yellows and orange colors, those can be really nice and just visually appealing on a plate and can make a dish look almost like restaurant style or restaurant quality. So tomatoes, definitely a really great seasonal ingredient to experiment with this time of the year. So we'll definitely be putting our tomatoes to use. And then otherwise, the rest of this recipe does use rather simple ingredients. And really what pulls together this recipe is the homemade pesto sauce. So that really is the star of the show, I think, here. And you only need a handful of ingredients for this. Pretty simple. You throw everything into a food processor or a blender. But there are a couple unique ingredients actually in this pesto. So let me kind of walk through what those are. So of course, starting off at a pesto, we might think basil, right? So basil certainly is going to be a main ingredient in this homemade pesto. We're going to have some garlic, and I do like to buy just the pre-minced garlic. So saves you time in the kitchen. It's already ready to go. We're also going to be adding lemon juice into the pesto. And now two of the more unique items for this recipe for the pesto are nutritional yeast. Now, for anyone not familiar, nutritional yeast here, this is what it could look like. This is the brand that we carry. This is a cheesy, umami, like nutty seasoning that's made from dry inactive yeast, which I know does not sound appetizing, but if you could kind of see, it almost just looks like any other old herb or spice. It's just little flakes in a jar like this. But this is not made from dairy, so there's no dairy in it. So for anyone that avoids dairy, or if you have an allergy or intolerance, this pesto would be safe for you to consume because there is no dairy. You're getting that like cheesy, savory flavor, mostly from the nutritional yeast. So if you haven't cooked with it before, this might be something new to pick up and try out. And the last ingredient in the pesto is cashews. Now, pesto does typically call for pine nuts, but pine nuts are rather expensive. Even if you're just getting a small amount, sometimes the jars can be quite pricey. So this recipe, like I said, calls for cashews, which are a more affordable option compared to a pine nut, and it's still going to save that same purpose in the pesto. So that could be more of an affordable, budget-friendly swap there. So as I said, it's just a handful of ingredients for that pesto. You blend everything up in your blender or food processor. And then what I did before I grilled the shrimp is I just tossed some of the shrimp in the pesto sauce. I popped those shrimp on skewers on the grill, waited until they were done cooking, and then I served it over these beautiful, thick tomato slices. So I sliced our big heirloom tomatoes here, pop those grilled shrimp on top, and then I drizzled a little bit more of the pesto on top of it. So hopefully you can see here. I'll put it under this camera as well, if this is a better angle for some of you. And you can see really how simple it is. We have those nice colors coming through from the green pesto and tomatoes. And what I love about this is it's a really light and refreshing recipe. This could be great if you're just looking for a lighter lunch. Maybe it's a really hot day. You'll get the nice refreshing aspect from the juicy tomatoes. This could also be a great appetizer. You know, if you were just having some friends over, some loved ones over, maybe just to sit outside and enjoy the sun, this could be something light to kind of munch on while you're out there. So that's our first super simple grilled recipe. That was our seafood recipe. So now let's go ahead and dive into our plant-based option. All right, so the star of our show here in this plant-based recipe is tofu. So here I have our Nature's Promise extra firm tofu. And tofu is often an ingredient that you'll see used in plant-based cooking, and plant-based eating and plant-based recipes really are pretty trendy within the past few years, but certainly we're still seeing there's a lot of interest, not even necessarily in folks that are looking to eat fully plant-based, but just looking to add more plant foods to their meals. So if tofu has ever seemed intimidating or you're not sure how to cook with it, I'll share a couple tips for how to get started. And then hopefully this simple summer recipe could be something to try out if you were curious to kind of work with tofu. So I would say before even we dive into the recipe, my first tip when you're working with firm or extra firm tofu would be to press it. And so what I mean by that is that tofu comes packaged in water, and that essentially just helps maintain its freshness. But when we want to work with tofu, so when you pull the block out of the water that it comes in, we want to, or you don't have to, but it could be helpful to press the tofu. And essentially what that means is we're pressing the tofu block to remove some of that water content that it's been holding on to. If we remove some of that water content, then in turn, our tofu can crisp up nicely when it's cooking because it's not holding on to so much moisture. And it also gives it the opportunity to kind of soak up some different marinades or seasonings that we're adding to it. And I would suggest using marinades or seasonings when you're cooking with tofu because on its own, it's often described as flavorless, but I don't think that's a bad thing because that just means tofu can really work in any recipe, and you can add those marinades and seasonings to give it the flavors that you're looking for in that particular recipe. So like I said, I would suggest pressing tofu. You certainly do not have to. It would be safe to consume tofu right out of the package or right after you've cooked it. But if you are interested to try out that trick, there certainly are some fancy kitchen gadgets out there you could get that would press the tofu for you, but I kind of did a DIY hack here, and I'm going to show you how I just use things I had at home to press my tofu. So I'm not sure if you can see here, but this little contraption that I've created, or I should say I didn't create this, I'm just creating it in my kitchen, but this is a helpful trick you'll likely find online as well if you search for tofu. But what I did first was just grab a plate, you could grab a cutting board, whatever you have, and then in between these two plates is actually the block of tofu wrapped up in a paper towel. So wrap it up in a paper towel and a kitchen towel, place it on a plate, place a plate on top of it, and then I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have a heavier book here resting on top of that plate, and this is naturally going to help press out some of that water content. So again, you could get creative with what you have in your kitchen. You don't need any of those fancy kitchen gadgets to kind of press some of that tofu water out. All right, so once you've pressed your tofu, let's dive into how you can make this grilled tofu recipe. So what I would suggest is once your tofu has pressed for anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes, you'll start to see a decent amount of water come out. This recipe calls for, or I should say, I just like to have tofu slabs. So I cut them into kind of rectangular size slabs, which you may be able to see in the second camera view that's up here on your screen. I have a sneak peek of what the finished tofu looks like, but I would cut them into sort of rectangular slices. And then I do like to let the tofu soak in a marinade before I start to cook with it, again, just to impart more of that flavor. And so for this recipe, I did a mixture of a sesame ginger sauce. So here I just have the Newman's Own sesame ginger dressing. And then I mix that with a bit of our Stop and Shop reduced sodium soy sauce. The reduced sodium can be helpful to look at just since soy sauce is quite high in sodium. This just helps remove a bit of that sodium content. So I made sort of a DIY mixture marinade of these two items, let the tofu sit in that, and then threw it on the grill. Now, my tip would be to prevent tofu from sticking to the grill, you could brush it lightly with a bit of oil before you throw it on your grill grates. But if you didn't have a grill, that's just not something you have available to work with. You can also use just a stovetop like grill grate or grill pan, which if you see here in our second camera view, I have just a grill pan over the stovetop that I've cooked the tofu on. And for really any grilling recipe, this kind of trick would likely work for most options there, where if it said grill something out on the grill, you likely could just grill it right over the stovetop on a grill pan as well. And so as you see here, I have these nice grill marks here on the tofu. And so once it's gotten to this point and the tofu is cooked, that is ready to be added to the remainder of our dish. So let me walk you through what we're putting that tofu on top of. So our recipe here is for a grilled tofu over zucchini squash noodle salad. So zucchini and yellow summer squash are also two seasonal items this time of year. They're packed with immune supporting vitamin C. They are also just delicious and flavorful. So just like tomatoes, zucchini could be another seasonal item to pick up at the grocery store. And so just to save time, I did pick up the pre-spiralized zucchini noodles. I think this is nice, especially if you have people coming over for a barbecue, you want to spend less time in the kitchen, you want to enjoy the outdoors. Picking this up can just be a time saver. You certainly could spiralize your own zucchini though, if you have a spiralizer. So I grabbed my zucchini noodles. I also grabbed some shredded carrots. Again, I went for the time-saving route. I grabbed our pre-shredded just matchstick carrots. And then I mixed those together here with our dressing mixture of the sesame ginger dressing and the soy sauce. So I have our shredded carrots, the zucchini noodles. I toss that with the dressing here. And then it's time to throw the tofu on top. So I'll go ahead and grab that off our grill grates. I'll put that delicious tofu right on top. And really grilling it does help improve its naturally soft and spongy texture. When you cook it on the grill, it really gets crispy, as you can see here. Hopefully in the second camera view, we have our nice grill char marks on there. And then the last step of this dish is just to add a little bit of crunch. So here I just have some roasted unsalted almonds that I've roughly chopped. And I like to just sprinkle those right at the top at the end because we are certainly getting some crunch from the tofu since we grilled it. And the zucchini noodles have a little bit of bite to it, but I think the real crunch of the almonds and adding a bit of that nutty flavor really does complement everything else that we have going on in the dish. And so this is what your finished product would look like here. We have our zucchini noodles with our grilled tofu. We have that delicious sesame ginger dressing and those crunchy almonds on top. And I'll show it over here for another side view as well. So as you can see, another relatively simple recipe to put together. It has just a handful of ingredients and really has a nice light and refreshing flavor, perfect for summer, especially if you're looking to switch things up on your grill. And that concludes our Serving Up Summer cooking demonstration for today. I want to thank you all so much for joining in. As a reminder, I'll be sending out links to the full recipes for each of these recipes. So be on the lookout for that if you're curious to get the full details so you can make this at home.